Hi everyone, I'm Kwame Thomas and welcome to The Conversation. Tonight we're joined by Damion Gordon, lecturer in public policy at the University of the West Indies. We will be exploring the by-election, voter representation and many more. Stay with us. Conversation. Welcome to The Conversation. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me, Kwame.
So, we have been seeing a whole lot of changes on the political landscape.
Yes.
We saw where we have one seat vacant in the Trelawny Southern, and now with the recent resignation of Marsha Smith, we now see Northeast Centre becoming vacant. But what has stuck out in my mind is why that sudden urgency to have a by-election for that particular seat when we have a seat that has been vacant for roughly a year.
Yes. So that is the million-dollar question. Obviously, the decision of the Prime Minister to quickly call a by-election in Northeast Centre follows the news that, Dr. Nigel Clark, is about to resign as the Minister of Finance. So that has fueled speculation that perhaps the Prime Minister decided to fast-track the election in Northeast Centre to ensure that Matty Samuda becomes a Member of Parliament, possibly because Matty Samuda may be promoted and will likely play an important role in the executive, in the Prime Minister's cabinet. It could also mean that the Prime Minister is making way for a vacancy in the Senate to get somebody else into the Senate. So we don't know. Right now, there are speculations as to the strategy behind the Prime Minister's move. Your guess is as good as mine.
You think the likelihood is that he might be put in a position to serve as Finance Minister?
Well, based on the fact that the law requires that the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister have to be drawn from the lower house of the Parliament, that has also fueled the fairly reasonable speculation that he could be a potential candidate to become the next Minister of Finance, even though there's nothing in his immediate, our background, and certainly his area of expertise is marketing.
Yeah.
Usually persons appointed to that ministry are individuals with technical expertise. You can look at the history of finance ministers. But again, we don't know the Prime Minister may, adopt a new approach. One is forward thinking, one which indicates is investing in youth and promoting youth.
Yeah.
And he perhaps has worked closely with Matty Samuda and has seen skills and competences that we may not, that may inspire confidence in him that he could be a Minister of Finance. Even though it's highly unlikely, it is certainly a possibility.
All right, so the next question that I'm thinking now, we're looking at Nigel Clark's pending, well, he's about to leave office. And we have heard, I remember earlier in his tenure, we heard Nigel, we heard that he's no good, we heard that he's going to sink the party, we've heard a lot of things. But now that he's going, you've been hearing that he's the best thing that we have seen in quite some time now. So is it a case whereby, as the old adage says, knowing the use I'm till him lose it?
I think the saying that he's the best Minister of Finance is relative. I don't think that is a universal consensus that he's the best Minister of Finance. Certainly, when we look at the macroeconomic indicators, they are trending in the right direction, and he must be given some credit for the general macroeconomic stability that the country enjoys. But I think a part of Nigel is the authority. He comes across as knowledgeable. He comes across
as a subject matter expert.
Yes, and he commands the ministry. People pays attention to him when he speaks. He's very articulate. He explains himself well, and therefore he inspires confidence because of how he carries himself and how he represents as a Minister of Finance. So again, in terms of the deliverables, there are different positions about whether or not his policies have shifted Jamaica into a different direction one has led to greater levels of,
growth,
equity and redistribution of wealth. We don't know if his policies have had those transformational effects, but what we do know is that his policies, similar to the policies that would have adopted from the previous Minister of Finance, have contributed to a climate of macroeconomic stability.
So then you're seeming to be, it seems as though you're hinting to the extent that it's not that he's necessarily come with one whole heap of new ideas. It's just that he has been very adept at steering the ship based on whatever was there, and he has added.
Pretty much. So the operative term that I used was stability, right? He has
we can throw in consistency as well.
Yes, environment of macroeconomic stability. Again, does that mean that the fundamental structure or character of the Jamaican economy has changed? Not necessarily, but I think stability is better than the alternative, which would be instability. So I think that to the extent that he has ensured or promoted or engendered macroeconomic stability, one could say on paper that he has done what a Minister of Finance is expected to do, which is to manage his portfolio to promote the general environment for macroeconomic stability. I think that's an important task of a Minister of Finance.
Yeah, the argument can also be, though, that he has led Jamaica through through COVID.
Right. Yes,
through COVID, and COVID is to some extent unprecedented. No one in this generation has seen something like COVID before, and he has been able to steer Jamaica through to the extent where even other countries around the world, Jamaica is a model now in terms of looking at how we have navigated that. So you have to credit that to his leadership.
But you have to look at economics from two perspectives. You have to look at the macro and the micro.
Yeah, so the
macro looks at the bigger picture, and this considers, these aggregate indicators that say our debt to GDP ratio is going down, or our poverty rate is going down, our unemployment rate is going down. But there are other considerations at the micro level. We're talking about considerations related to the quality of jobs, the ability of wages to allow ordinary workers to survive in this economy. We're still seeing, we know Jamaica still has one of the highest levels of income inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor still continues to widen. Cost of living is very high. And the kinds of investments that we expect, because once growth is taking place, that will translate into increased investments, for example, in infrastructure, in the healthcare system, in the public education system. We still see those we still see lingering concerns. So while you may have done a good job in terms of
could we not
having
argue?
a steady pair of hands, in terms of having a steady pair of hands, the social and economic transformation aspect of what I expect from a minister, there are still some concern, but I'll give him a passing grade.
I was about to ask because I'm thinking that the possibility exists, if we're being honest, I'm brutally honest. Could it not be that based on your expectations, then he would have gotten a passing grade? But if you should compare him to many of the other finance ministers, so it's just a case whereby our expectations were too high.
I don't think it is too high, because a Minister of Finance ultimately serves the people. And the greatest measure, or the most important measure of how well a Minister of Finance performs is based on the perception and the responses of people. Because people must see tangible changes and tangible improvement in the quality of their life.
It
can't be, no.
It's a perception, you kind of grab me there, because there's a difference between what's perceived and what's real, and sometimes we tend to see. So yes, there's some growth. Macroeconomically speaking, we're growing, but in terms of the felt needs, we are not necessarily where we want to be. Admittedly, that's a condition of the world.
No, but the point I'm making to you is that oftentimes we boast about macroeconomic growth, but we do not consider the fact that macroeconomic growth can be exclusionary. In other words, yes, the economy may be growing, but there is uneven distribution of that growth to the extent that a large number of people feel excluded from macroeconomic growth. So that is the issue. We want to ensure that we have an economic framework that is inclusive, to ensure that, you know, average Jamaicans can feel a part or be a part of, you know, the general conditions of macroeconomic growth. And we have to look at things such as wage levels. We have to look at things such as the ability of ordinary Jamaicans to be able to buy a house or to go to the supermarket and buy basic goods and services, to have access to quality health care, to have access to quality education, to have access to good roads. All of those are important facets of. So finally, I want to make the point that people need to distinguish growth from development. Growth is really a very economic. It's an economic term. It means that it looks at the aggregate picture, that the macro, the big picture. But development looks at how economic growth translates to improvement in the quality of life of people. Or it transforms the life of people. So if growth is taking place and people are saying, well, the country is heading in the wrong direction, we don't feel confident about the state of the economy, we are still complaining about the public health care facilities, we are still complaining about all of these things. It suggests that there is some dissonance between growth and development.
Let me hold you on that point.
That's a very important point.
Let me hold you on that point. So, we're going to our first break, just reminding you that you're watching The Conversation. I'm speaking with Damion Gordon, lecturer in public policy and politics. Do continue to stay with us. Welcome back to The Conversation. I am sat here with Damion Gordon, lecturer in policy and politics at the University of the West Indies. So we pretty much were assessing Dr. Clark's legacy, and you're saying that there was a difference between, or there is a difference between growth and development. So you were saying? Yes,
growth is a more abstract concept. It considers the big picture. It considers the macroeconomic environment. But I think development is more important because development considers how, you know, improvement in the macroeconomic environment translates to improvement or greater investments in those areas that will transform or positively impact the lives of ordinary people.
And so, your argument is that what's your argument? Is it that you're saying there has not been any development?
A disconnect. I'm not saying that there hasn't been any development. But there's often a disconnect between growth and development because oftentimes you hear that the economy is growing and the indicators suggest that the economy is growing. But when you speak and engage with average Jamaicans, they're saying, well, we are not feeling the impact of this economic growth, which tells us in no uncertain term that there's often a dissonance between what is on paper or what is purported as being economic growth and the extent to which average people feel that economic growth has been inclusive. And if it is exclusionary economic growth, then that is not positive economic growth. Economic growth should move and transform and transform the lives of people.
Individuals. So yes. I understand what you're saying, and I'm tempted to agree to some extent. But when you see that this is not something that's germane to Jamaica now, the struggles that we have gone through or we are going through because we're on the tail end of COVID.
Yes.
We must admit that some of those things that you're talking about, the dissonance is primarily based on how the news has been fed to us because you're looking at struggles right around the world. Cost of living globally has increased. And you can argue that when you look at the income tax threshold being moved, the fact that persons have increased, salaries have increased for some persons and all of that.
But increase in salary has to be contextualized because if the value of the Jamaican dollar today compared to the value of the Jamaican dollar several years, the value of the Jamaican dollar significantly depreciated, which means that the real value, but no, I'm just saying that the real value of a salary increase is lost in the fact that cost of living
has increased.
Is higher, and the purchasing power of the Jamaican dollar has also decreased. So I think that when you look at those considerations, you have to question whether or not a salary increase is sufficient right? You may have a salary increase, but is it sufficient to allow Jamaicans to keep a pace with cost of living? Is it sufficient to empower Jamaicans in terms of, purchasing power? So again, it requires some critical evaluation rather than just looking at these things from a surface level. Because I will tell you that we have to look at the relative economic indicators across the Caribbean. And in most of these indicators, Jamaica still lingers or lags behind many of its Caribbean counterparts. And we may say COVID-19 is a factor, but these have been the realities before COVID-19. We are one of the highest rate of income inequality in the Western Hemisphere.
I love the fact that you said that.
So these are...
Remember what you stated?
Yes.
You said that we are among one of the low, in terms of income inequalities, it's widest here when compared to many other countries.
Most other Caribbean countries.
All right, across the Caribbean. So, but then you must argue though, that in light of that, the fact that we have been able to do all that we have been able to do, coming out of COVID and all of those things, and a worldwide contraction of the economies, then you can't just give him. I'm just asking you about the fasting
that is why I said to you that Nigel commands respect and authority, because he has shown a pair of steady hands that have created the general condition for macroeconomic stability. But I will not go ahead and say, well, he's the best minister of finance the country has ever seen, because I don't believe that the policies adopted by the current government as well as previous governments have necessarily led to the transformation the transformation has not necessarily led to the trickling down and the transformation of the lives of ordinary Jamaican. I've not seen where those key development indicators are moving in the direction at the pace that I would that would make me feel comfortable to say that this person has transformed the Jamaican economy. I've not seen that.
That doesn't sound like the work for any one individual.
And that will be something continuous, obviously. And that may take some time.
Persons have been arguing that with the departure of, or the impending departure of Nigel Clarke, the Jamaica Labour Party is not going to be able to withstand or to grow or to command the confidence of the people. And the Prime Minister has gone as far as to say that his leadership is not based on personalities, but it's institutionalized. What do you say to that statement?
Yes, I think that is a good approach because, for far too long our politics has been based on this cult of personality, where individuals are promoted to positions of leadership oftentimes on the basis of their personal attributes rather than their capabilities. So I think that I am in full support of that approach. And that approach suggests that the Prime Minister shift into a more merit-based approach that looks at more, profound or considerations rather than superficial considerations when making these important decisions. And again, you have to know who your people are, and you would have been working with all of them in various capacities over the years, and he's in a good position to assess their respective skills and their weaknesses. So I think that approach, a rule-based approach, which is driven by principle, rather than by feelings and emotions, is actually a better approach than and I commend the Prime Minister. If that is the approach that he takes, I certainly commend him for that.
Also, if memory serves me, it was, I guess I can go as far as to quote the leader of the opposition, Mark Golden, as saying that with Nigel's departure, the Andrew Holness-led administration doesn't have a foot or a leg to stand on. So, because he was so good at doing what he, well, pretty much the only thing that was functioning in the party. Do you share those sentiments?
I think the concern would be the transition, whether or not this decision was known beforehand, whether or not that identified somebody who would have been working with Nigel to ensure that, Dr. Clarke, to ensure that, there would be a seamless transition. Because it's a very important ministry, right? And we're in the middle of various reform programs. We're also in the middle of several multilateral agreements.
Yes.
And restructuring of the public sector. We are the wage salary restructuring program. So it's a very, very delicate, very, very, very important period, and therefore there's no room for instability.
The margin of error is extremely small.
Very
no
small
space for
margin of
instability.
error. So we want to ensure that there is a seamless transition process to ensure that the gains that we have made and the programs that currently are operationalized are not derailed in any form or in any way. So I think the concern is whether or not, that transition process was put in place, and as soon as he leaves, then the Prime Minister will readily identify a suitable successor. And I think that is a legitimate concern.
All right, so we go to our second break. We're just discussing the legacy of the outgoing Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clarke. Continue to stay with us. You're watching The Conversation. Welcome back to The Conversation. So we just started, well, we're at the tail end of assessing Dr. Clarke's legacy.
Yes,
and one of the questions that I want to ask you is, who do you think would be a good successor? From the outside looking in.
Yes, what do you think a good successor? I think his shoes, admittedly, will be very difficult to fill. Again, he as a Minister of Finance, commanded authority and respect. People believed in him. He exuded confidence and inspired public confidence in his stewardship of that portfolio. Those are not shoes that will be filled easily. We're considering the other options, Favour Williams, but, people have used her performance as a Minister of Education to say, to question whether or not she has the acumen or the kind of credible disposition to be the Minister of Finance.
Would you think that it's a matter of disposition or acumen, because she has the qualifications, it would seem?
Yeah, but I think it requires a total package. In other words, you have to be a convincing spokesperson as well. And Nigel Clarke was the perfect package in terms of not only having the qualifications, but in terms of how he presents himself to the public and how he responds to issues and how he engages the public and the international community. He had the personal, the attributes as well as the qualification that made people, believe that, the country is in capable hands. I am not quite sure if Favour has that same
Anyone
effect.
else?
I was thinking that the Prime Minister perhaps would have considered bringing somebody outside of the government.
But based on what you have said,
but that appears, that is unlikely to be the case, because that person would have to be a member of Parliament first. So clearly, he will choose among the members of the legislature or his current cabinet. Again, the names that we are hearing, top of the most common name that we are hearing is Favour. But then Matu Samuda could be a consideration, who knows. Let's see what the Prime Minister decides. Yes?
So the fact that he hasn't said anything about who a viable successor would be, what do you think of that particular
Maybe he's having the private conversations with all the candidates, and maybe he has already communicated to the individual who intends to replace Nigel Clarke that, hey, you're the person who will be replacing Nigel Clarke. He may not have made that information public, but it does not mean that these discussions have not been taking place privately, and at the appropriate time, he will announce who the successor of Nigel Clarke will be. I'm quite sure that given the importance of that ministry, it's a decision that is being handled with utmost care and due diligence. So I'm assuming that the successor would have already been notified or identified.
All right. So tell me now about as we shift gears into the local government elections, the by-election rather, that's being called. The fact that this is just one of potentially 5 seats. Based on the recent readings by the EOJ, we're looking at $30 million per seat. So that's upwards of $150 million. what is so special about Northeast Centre that, you know, he saw it fit to announce and run into this one, and they have left, when you look at, for example, Trelawny Southern, that has been vacant for a year. That's how we started. So what do you think is up his sleeves outside of prepping Matthias Amuda or anything? Why this particular seat? Why the priority on it?
Yes. There could be two factors. Certainly, as I've indicated, I think that the Prime Minister has earmarked Matthias Amuda to play an important role in his cabinet as a minister for one of the key ministries, and potentially the Prime Minister is courting a replacement in the Senate. That is one consideration. I think the second consideration has to do with electioneering, in the sense that
testing the machine.
Testing the machine, because obviously the government did not do very well in the local government election, and the opposition has made gains. And of all the seats now, the Northeast Centre is presumably the safest to win for the Jamaica Labour Party, even though traditionally South Trelawny has voted.
South Trelawny for more than three decades have been a
but what has happened
stronghold.
recently is that the opposition has installed a candidate who is very popular and who won a division several years ago as an independent. And in the absence of a member of parliament, the word on the ground is that he has been filling that gap. So the dynamics may have shifted somewhat, in the sense that this is a seat that the opposition has never generally taken seriously. But over the last several months, they've installed a credible candidate who may cause some problem for the Jamaica Labour Party. So it may be a case where they're not contesting.
And we see Ryan, it was Dr. Ryan Simpson. He was from...
But we're talking about South Trelawny, right? So it could be a case where the Prime Minister is saying, well, I want to ensure that I win. The first by-election, it is important for me to win. And maybe he feels that the Northeast Centre is the most winnable of all the vacancies at this point in time. And if you set the tone by winning one, then you hope that will mobilize your supporters, and you may call it South Trelawny next, and if the PNP does a contest and you win, that's 2 out of 2 in a row. You usually like it to win Northwest St. Andrew because of the history of that seat. So that may be 3, and then that leaves the 2 by-election for the council seats. And maybe those will be more competitive. Because I think the councillor for the A-non division won that.
But
seat
having three is not so bad then, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just like you want to win first. You want to win. You want to show that you can win. And obviously you're going to take your chance with the seats that you're more comfortable with.
So you're saying it's electioneering?
It could be some electioneering to show that you're still able to win, and to say that I can still win elections, and that may help to mobilize some of the base of the party in preparation for the general, which is next year.
Okay, so members from the hierarchy of the People's National Party have said that this is wasting this is money, this is government playing politics, and they're wasting taxpayers' money, because you're looking at north of $150 million. So, and we have to pay attention to the fact that we're going into an election year. Election is constitutionally due 2025. So if we're going to have roughly 5 or at most 5 by-elections now, and then we're going into a general election year, do you think that it's justified for the People's National Party to say that, listen, they're not going to contest any of these because it's a waste of time or money?
So, as a matter of principle, I believe that citizens should be represented. A member of parliament serves a very important function. The member of parliament provides representation for the constituency issues in the parliament, and the member of parliament is able to access resources to undertake programs of intervention at the constituency level. So I don't think that any constituency should be without representation at either the local or at the parliamentary level for a prolonged period of time. So considering the fact that we have I don't think we have ever had 5 vacancies or 5 potential vacancies in seats at one time. Usually we have about 1 vacancy, but to have 5 at the same time, it is highly abnormal. It's anomalous. a general election is due next year. I think the conventional wisdom is that perhaps why not just have a general election instead of having a set of by-elections this year that are costly, and then have a next general election that will be very costly. And given the fact that we are coming out of the aftermath of a hurricane, plus, I don't think that there's an appetite among people now for electioneering. I think people believe that resources should be prudently allocated and spent, not on an election right now. If you're going to spend money on an election, why not just wait until the general election? Or if anything, why not just have all the by-elections one time? Why having the by-elections in a piecemeal manner? Those people see that as a waste of resources, and it has led to people speculating the motives of the Prime Minister. The motives don't seem to be transparent to many people. The motives don't seem to be clear. The strategy does not appear to be transparent or clear. And that invites skepticism, that invites distrust, and that may have a negative impact on the Prime Minister's political capital. Let's see how it plays out.
You think that he's poor at communicating this particular time then?
I think that he has not shown a principled approach to the by-election, because if he did, then he would have held the by-election for South Trelawny first, because that was the first seat in which there was a vacancy. There has been a vacancy for over a year. But instead, he quickly held a move to announce the nomination day and by-election day in Northeast and on. Literally a couple of days after the vacancy was announced.
You have said that it might be strategic.
Yes, but people are looking at it may be strategic. But again, people expect leaders to govern based on principles.
Okay.
Right? So that is also important to some voters.
Hold that particular thought.
Yes.
Just want to remind you that you're watching the conversation, and we will be back after these messages. This is our final break. Well, welcome back to the conversation. We're speaking with Damion Gordon, lecturer in public policy and politics at the University of the West Indies. So I want to find out now, we're looking at the possibility of an unprecedented third term if the Jamaica Labour Party should win. Question, what are some of the stark differences that you see in relation to the policy platforms of both these political parties, and how will these differences shape the upcoming general election? Yes.
Well, incumbent or ruling parties tend to campaign on their legacy, their achievements. They tend to reiterate their achievements.
You think they have done enough?
That is what there have been some positive developments. Do people consider these positive developments sufficient to warrant a third term? Certainly the government and the Prime Minister have become less popular, as evidenced by the most recent polling data. And if the outcome of the local government election was a test, then it's clear that the political landscape is shifting and has become more competitive than it was several years ago. I think the challenge with the People's National Party is that there is a general climate of political disinterestedness and distrust. And it is struggling to position itself as a credible alternative to the government, even though it has made some gains because of the fact that, people more or less assume that both political parties are pretty much the same. But the People's National Party has to clearly distinguish itself from the ruling party, has to clearly articulate feasible policies in a simple way that people can discern or understand as policies that will have a positive impact on their lives. It has to respond to what the polls have been saying are the major concerns of Jamaicans: crime, need to have a comprehensive crime plan, need to strengthen the framework for fighting corruption or tackling corruption, people have concerns about the ability of young people to access home ownership. We have to look at how NHT work. We have to look at that framework. We have to look at the caps for mortgage, for loans. Those are important considerations. We have to look at the job situation. How do we retain our talents who are leaving in drove? What are the plans? How do we protect the creative and the cultural industries? What is our plan to promote food security? I think that these are issues that matter to Jamaicans, and the People's National Party has to put a set of good ideas on the table that people will say, okay, we see these ideas as the vehicles are feasible to move the country forward.
In other words, you're saying
that will not be an easy task.
They need to be more articulate in terms of what plans are.
They need to be clear. They need to articulate, and they need to engage people in various forums. You need to adopt a grassroots strategy where you engage your stakeholders and you engage citizens widely.
It sounds like you're saying.
That is very important.
It sounds as though you're saying that they're not good at that because we are accustomed to hearing that the People's National Party has been traditionally good at pulling out grassroots, but you're saying that they need to be able to articulate or communicate more clearly to their grassroots.
So I'm saying that it requires a diverse strategy, because obviously the means of communication and engagement are now wider than are more diverse than they were. So the party has to consider a multi-pronged, multi-layered strategy, but that strategy must involve active engagement, right?
So tell me about the role now.
That is very important.
Tell me about the role of party leadership in terms of securing a third term for the GLP, especially regarding public trust in Prime Minister Andrew Holness now. Yeah.
Party leadership is very important, mainly because I think Jamaican voters have traditionally considered the leader of a political party when they choose to cast their vote. There has been some shift in that, where I think people are becoming more issue. I think voting is now becoming more issue-based, not at a pace that I would want to see it. But it is clear that people now are more concerned about issues that affect their lives. I think it still helps when you project a certain personality that is appealing, charismatic, relatable personality. That certainly helps. But I mean, in the long term, to secure a third term, it requires more than that. Yes, and I think that some of the goodwill or the capital that the Prime Minister would have enjoyed, I think that is waning as people start to say, well, our experiences, our realities, have not real, do not potentially. You may not have earned a third term because you have not done enough over the last 2 terms, despite the fact that we had high hopes and expectations for you. We're very enthusiastic, and we are giving you ample time. You can't say they gave you 10 years going into the next third term. That will be 15 years. So I think that generally the consensus could be that, yes, we are giving you ample time. Now it is time for us to move into a new direction. And is the new direction a better direction?
You don't know.
I'm not sure that voters are sufficiently convinced, based on the fact that so many voters are still on the fence currently.
So that now leads me to the next question. How can both political parties seek to ramp up voter turnout? Because we're looking at anywhere southwards of 40% of the persons coming out to vote. Yes. What are some of the things that they would need to do to ensure that they're able to get something that's better than that? Because voter apathy is at an all-time high.
If you look at it, voter apathy is not only a phenomenon in Jamaica.
No, it's right across the world.
It's a global phenomenon, but it is certainly at a crisis level in Jamaica, where we have had 2 elections in which less than 50% of those who
less than 40%
who are registered to vote cast their vote. And I think that is really a reflection of how disconnected and the low confidence that the public has in either of the 2 political parties. So there's that trust gap, there's that trust deficit. And again, the party has to commit itself to, or both political parties have to commit themselves to re-earning the trust of Jamaicans. And that requires, as I've noted, engagement. And it's not just engagement of, party officials talking to. It's important to also talk with and listen. So the party could, engage in more listening exercise, a listening tour that touches every crevice and corner of the society, every single group, the important stakeholders, the diaspora. I think that is really the pathway. The pathway would be active engagement, listening, exchanges of ideas, and showing that you understand and you have plans to address the issues that matter to people. And that will be a steady, it won't be an overnight process of, re-earning the trust, but that is what the party, the People's National Party, has to do.
All right, so, well, both, based on how you started out, I admit the assumption that both political parties
and both political
need to
parties.
do that.
Yes,
now,
yes.
As a political commentator, because we admit that you are one, how do you see your particular role now in terms of helping to shape public discourse in such a, well, it's highly polarized now. You either have persons who are all fired up, which is the minority, and those who are just, they can't bother. How do you help to shape such a discourse now so that persons can actually see the importance of playing an active role in the leadership of the country?
So more important than being a political commentator, I am a lecturer. And therefore, I engage with young people in their capacity as students, and many of these young people are apathetic and they are disinterested. I try to show them that, not being engaged in politics does not mean that politics does not impact your life, because decisions are still made, policies are made, laws are still passed, and all of these important political processes impact your life, right? So, and that is a perspective I normally begin with, to show individuals, or to allow individuals to realize or to understand that whether you are engaged or whether you are involved in politics or whether you like politics or not, whatever is done at the level of the central government, whatever is done at the level of the local and the municipal authorities has implication for your lives. I also try to show them that political participation is not limited to voting. There are various other forms of political mobilization and engagement, attending forums, writing, voicing your concerns, being a part of the various civil society organizations. You can become politically engaged in various ways. As it relates to voting, I always tell them that voting is a right that many of us take for granted, but there was a time in our history where only 10% of the population could vote before the 1940s, and that was people who owned property, and that excluded the black masses. Mm-hmm. That right was hard fought for, and it's not a right that we should take for granted. But I also tell them that you must consider and look carefully at the platforms of the candidates who put themselves to office, and read the manifestos. You need to read the manifestos. You need to familiarize yourself with the policy positions of the political parties. Those are some of the things I do to encourage them,
So
yes.
the last in about 15 seconds, what are some of the roles, though, that you see yourself and the rest of academia playing in terms of informing voters about public policies, and how can scholars like yourself elevate the quality of what you call public debate? 15 seconds.
Again, our role is facilitating, our role is educating, our role is engaging and mediating the conversations. We have, practical means. We encourage group presentations, group discussions. This is a part of what we do as academics. We present the various perspectives, models, and theories of governance and politics and public policy making. We invite students to express their expectations and understanding and knowledge, and we provide clarification where necessary. And we provide practical, means of testing knowledge and testing problem-solving skills. I think that is, we do things that are within our reach.
Yeah.
We do things that are within our reach. And, if it's, even the impact is marginal, we consider it to be a positive impact nonetheless.
All right, thank you very much for the discussion. And also we want to say thanks for tuning in to the conversation. We also want to say a big thank you to Mr. Damion Gordon for stopping by. I'm Kwame Thomas, and we've explored key issues impacting Jamaica's political landscape. And we've even touched on the Finance Minister, Nigel Clarks, and his impact. So you don't want to miss our next episode. We continue to dive into stories that shape our region's future. So please ensure to follow us on all our social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and X. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Kwame Thomas. Stay informed, stay engaged, and see you next time.